What is up? It's Shmeaty, and today we're talking about everything you need to know as a new player getting into PvP. I'm joined by my friend Drew Q, who has been playing Pokemon competitively since 2014 and was recently top 10 on the PokeMMO NU ladder along with snatching a tournament win. You can say hello to the people.
Hello, people. Shmeaty's selling me short. I have so many cool accomplishments. That's whatever. That's fine. We can get into it.
Well, unlike that, I'm very new to PvP myself, so we thought pairing a new player with a really experienced one would be an interesting dynamic to bring, because a lot of PvP content is just one really extremely experienced player talking to another at a really high level, even when they're trying to break it down and make it easy. So we're attempting to make PvP accessible to everyone. We're primarily PokeMMO players, but this guide could really be used for any Pokemon game or generation, so if this all sounds good to you, then stick around because this video promises a ton of valuable information. And now this part of the video was very clearly scripted, but the upcoming conversation is not totally scripted. It's outlined with some prepared questions, but is meant to be a much more natural conversation, and should therefore be easier to learn from than just numbers and lists. So if you like this kind of podcast type content, let us know and we'll definitely make more. Alright, let's dive in. One of the first things that really stood out when I first started watching PvP content was you can't necessarily just mix and match any Pokemon that you want to build on your team of 6, can you?
Well, yes and no, because to me, half the fun in playing Mons is that you can absolutely mix and match whatever you want to play within the context of your tier, right? So you're going to be restricted to the tiering on wherever you're playing, but you can still paint with a fairly broad brush. If you don't know, those tiers are overused, underused, and never used. And the actual usage-based tiering means the frequency in which a Pokemon is used is going to determine which specific tier they're actually going to be placed in. So you can always bring a Pokemon from a lesser tier up to a greater one. You can use all the never used guys and overused, but you can't do it vice versa, right? All of these placements are going to be tracked in the PvP statistics tab, and Pokemon are actually adjusted to their proper tier monthly based on their usage. The cutoff is going to depend on which month of the season we're in. There's some detailed statistics that are magically on the screen now. Shmeaty's an amazing editor. Am I pointing in the right direction? Probably not. But for example, let's say there were 100,000 OU games played and Magikarp was used in 5,500 of them. It would have 5.5% usage, right? That would move it all the way up from untiered up to never used, or to overused rather. And let's say the following month it was only used in 100 games. It had virtually no usage. It would only move back down to underused. So any Pokemon can shoot all the way up through the tiers, but if it's going down because of reduced usage, it has to cascade down through all the tiers, down through overused to underused, back down to never used, and eventually untiered. The important thing to understand is that a Pokemon's stats, its moves, they're not all that relevant when you're placing in a tier. What matters is how often it's actually used, and this works because naturally the player base is going to use what wins the most, kind of obviously, right? I'm going to use whichever is going to lead me to success the easiest. Now, I didn't mention doubles. Obviously, doubles exist, but it kind of is its own thing. It's not necessarily a tier, it's more of a format. And so, because of that, it functions differently from the rest of this. And I don't really mean the actual double battle part of that. What I mean is there's no usage involved. Basically, everything is fair game. Stuff like Sharpness Gallade, Swords Dance, Garchomp, Draco Meteor, Hydreigon, and all that. Everything that would normally be banned and overused or whatever tier is completely fair game. The only thing that doubles follows is going to be the tier wide ban. So like Moody and Acupressure, the really, really super broken stuff, you're not going to be able to use in doubles. But everything else is completely fair game.
That's really interesting though, because like we were talking about off recording, there's so much more to think about in doubles with with just having more Pokemon and more options for every move. So having that much more or that many more things or access to things that aren't limited by tiers makes that sound even crazier. I also didn't realize that they update the tiers that frequently based on the usage rates. You said it was every month?
Yeah. So naturally stuff will just fall. There's ebbs and flows to the tiers. There's some counterbalances that we put in place. So there's a stability policy that has been used infrequently for some Pokemon that bounce between tiers. Like it just keeps going from never used to underused to never used to underused. There's some checks in place to keep that from happening. There's also obviously a tier council, which is 10 people that kind of keep watch of these shifts. So if there's something that seems a little bit broken that might drop down to a lower tier, those are the guys that vote on that and say, hold on, let's keep this away from the lower tiers. Like for example, like Haxorus naturally would have dropped and never used uh last month or a couple months ago, but tier council looked at that and saw its like implications on the tier and said, okay, this is probably going to be broken, we're going to go ahead and quick ban this and make sure nothing crazy happens. So
Oh,
there's checks and balances to all of it. Yeah.
yeah, that's super interesting, and definitely some more of the, finer information that a new player definitely wouldn't necessarily know. Yeah, I'm just learning that now
Mm-hmm.
making this video, so.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was a really helpful explanation. Thinking about the tiers, which one do you think would be the most beginner friendly and why?
So there's honestly like a surprising amount of debate on this, but in my opinion, I think the answer is anything that is not overused. And that's not to say that OU is bad by any means. I just
Yeah,
think
that's
it's the
definitely
most.
different than what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you ask me, I think OU is it's the most like solved metagame, right? So if you're a new guy starting out, then you're probably gonna want to use stuff that you want to try, stuff that you want to use that might not be meta, right? But this should come as no surprise that OU is considered solved because it's just a matter of like the sheer battle volume. Like last month, for example, Overused had literally 10 times the battle volume of any other tier. So there's a lot of new folks that make the mistake of diving straight into OU because they want to try their hand at these fun creative teams. It has the most options, right? There's not as many bans as the other tiers. But the metagame's actual like innovations and staples, they've been recognized, they've been optimized through like literally millions of battles. So this stuff is figured out to a T, right? This means that compared to underused or never used, like the margin of error for team building mistakes or experimentation is a lot less. It's a lot less. And that's not to say that you can't find these new innovations and like quirky metagame choices off meta Pokemon is what we call them. But they're a lot harder to find. And
It
it's
low
ironic
key,
because
it low key kind
go
of
ahead.
sounds like trying to bet on like football or something like that, like an over under. Like it's
Hmm.
down to like such a science. Like there's a reason why they're so confident putting it out there for people to bet on, right?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, like, yeah, and it's not to say it hasn't changed because it's always changing and evolving. Even like decade-old metagames are, but we've had the same set of guys to use in the overused tier for a while. So the strongest kind of like archetypes and team builds, like those have been brought to light so much more than they have in other tiers. So that leads me to say I think honestly never used is the most beginner friendly. The battles are faster than underused. The power level is noticeably lower in my experience. It's the most forgiving in terms of team builds, and I can say this because I've had my ass handed to me by more novices than I'm willing to admit in NU that have used Pokemon that I'm like, whoa, okay, I haven't seen that before. What the hell is going on, right? So I can say at least in regards to that tier with like certainty that if there's something you want to make work that is legal for that tier, you can absolutely make it happen, right?
That makes it sound like a lot of fun, and kind of like I wish I didn't fall for just starting in OU. You're gonna have to show me this NU ladder game.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But there's nothing wrong with starting an OU too. I mean, it's the easiest to find games. It's the easiest to find feedback on. So I totally get that. But if you have the resources, then I wouldn't necessarily get your foot in the door with PvP in that tier.
Yeah, well, so that's great to know that, like, if you choose NU or OU to really get your feet wet, how would you start going about building a competitive team for that tier, or thinking about how you would even do that? Because I know that's one of the biggest, most daunting questions, and me coming from other places like playing Magic the Gathering and other things where I'm used to building, like that's part of the craft that I really like. So I want to sink my teeth in. I want to be able to build something, but just in a place, where do I even start?
Yeah, so that's obviously such a loaded question, like you said, but you just need to start with like a specific vision in mind. So all these teams have different archetypes, right? So before you're even choosing what Pokemon you want to use, you got to think like, is my team going to be hyper offense? Is it going to be balanced? Is it going to be stall? Is it going to be weather? Like, what am I actually building? What is my goal with this team? Like a huge mistake that people make often is they make builds with teams that aren't complementary to each other. They're not cohesive, and so the vision is kind of cloudy towards what the team is actually trying to accomplish.
That makes a lot of sense. Trying to do just picking something that looks really good because you like it, or like trying to do too much, or not really understanding, so you're choosing something conflicting. Um, there's I hear some things like like there's a lot of like stall, and like there's players that don't like playing against stall, and there's like, oh, like this is HO or like balance, and like I know a little bit more about that now just from like watching games and like content creators and stuff, but uh I think that's like what you kind of like what you mean by like having a vision, right? Like finding one of those types or like archetypes and then like going with that.
Yeah, basically. And like when it comes to that, I think it's just a matter of like what feels the most comfortable to you, right? So like obviously like stigma there's stigmas with stall. Like everyone's always complaining about stall players or to a crazy degree is like the Shedinja Diglett teams, right? Those are stigmatized to a crippling degree, right? But at the end of the day, it's like it's whatever feels most comfortable to you, right? If you feel strongest using stall, then use stall. If you feel like you win the most battles with weather or with offense, and that's what you should be building with, right? I think it's worth trying everything and figuring out what your favorite is because you might find the sequencing to be easier with one archetype towards the other. And I'll definitely say like the best players are masters of every archetype. They can recognize those patterns, they can recognize the ways to play. But if you're starting off, then you can still absolutely dominate with any archetype. Just got to figure out like what works best for you, right? And like the last thing I'll say with that is like regardless of the archetype, my favorite types of teams are the ones where you can tell your opponent what's about to happen and it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't, you can literally whisper them what move you're about to click and it doesn't matter. Like the best teams are truly the best teams are built where your opponent can't defend against your moves or whatever
Oh
you're gonna
man,
do, right? Like you set yourself up for that slam dunk in that way.
hearing that brought me a little bit too much joy, like picturing being able to do that. um but
Yeah, right.
would you be able to describe a little bit more like what those different like archetypes are, or like what type of like play style they might fit?
Yeah, so like I guess as far as like actually building those archetypes, like I like to start with a specific Pokemon that I'm interested in and I kind of take it from there, right? So I think about what Pokemon I want to use and what kind of set I want to use with it rather. And then I'm thinking how that's gonna mesh with whatever archetype, right? I'm thinking what archetypes that gonna mesh with best. So like say I want to use a Gliscor. Do I want to use a bulky Gliscor? Do I want to use like a setup one? How am I going to make that fit best, right? Because there's a handful of roles that we want to fill depending on the archetype. So I might not necessarily use 6 Pokemon that I want to use, right? And that's not to say I'm picking like my least favorite Pokemon, but there might be something that I really want to use in the team, but it's not my favorite. It's not what I'm basing the team around, and it doesn't really like fit into the profile of the team, right? So sometimes I'll end up choosing like an alternative to that I like a little bit less, but it ends up being more useful because it's better at the specific role that I needed to fill, right? And
Okay,
then with
so
that, like, go
in
ahead.
this scenario, you're starting about like talking. The start is, this is a particular Pokemon that I want to use on my team. All
Hmm.
right, and then this is the archetype that would this Pokemon would fit more
Yeah,
towards, and then this is the role then that is going to be this Pokemon is going to be on that team, and then that's how you're going to that's the starting place, and then you figure out what complementary pieces you need alongside of that.
right, exactly. So like, so the best example for that is because this team ended up looking so wacky. If you can actually see on Spidge's channel with my video there, on the Arcanine Curse team. I what I did when I built that team was I picked Arcanine and I said I want to build around this Curse Arcanine. How am I going to set it up for success in the best way? And that's how that team ended up getting these really weird picks. Like I had Haunter on that team, I had Electabuzz on that team, I had Whiscash on those team. You do not see those guys but I found the roles that I needed to fill. I needed toxic spikes, I needed hazard stack, I needed a fast electric type pivot, and those just happened to be the mons that filled that role the best, right? So I'm not necessarily looking at like my favorite guys or the meta picks. I'm looking at like the actual roles themselves and who can accomplish those roles the best, right? They might not have impressive stats or abilities, but there's a fantastic chance that these Pokemon offer what we call role compression, where they can actually do several roles at the same time. So, like Whiscash, like I just said, for example, not only offers this kind of suicide lead, like hazard stack type Pokemon, but it also offers a Volt immunity, which is really hard to find in the never used tier where I built that team, right? There's also stuff like Quagsire, another water ground type who has really, really unimpressive stats on the surface. But then you take a bit closer of a look and you see this is an electric immunity, this is hazard setting, this is a physical wall, and this is sweep insurance. I have 4 roles in one Pokemon that has a really low base stat total, but it offers a ton of value to a team, right?
Okay. That is so man, that I feel like that got into the weed some. And that was like that was a lot. That was really good information.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like that covers a good bit of like the thought process of like getting started, like how am I going to approach building a team. Um, uh, I know being the new player that I am and hearing everything that you just said, that felt like a full dive, and I kind of want to like pull out of the weeds a little bit and then ask some like get
Okay.
back to like some super basic questions
Yeah, yeah, that's fine, bro.
to
That's
then like
fine. That's fine. Yeah.
to then like re-dive back in because I'm over here like, oh man, okay, well, like the archetypes though, like what is hyper offense, like what is stall, like what do they do, and then like how is this Pokemon then going to like how do I know then, like if like using that Arcanine example, Arcanine is actually one of my favorite Pokemon, so we can
Okay.
let's just go with that. So Arcanine is good at what and does what, so would fit what archetype, and then that archetype is what type of play style, like I'm trying to achieve this, or like this is what it's really good at. So yeah, can we potentially like go through the different archetypes and like actually what you're trying to accomplish with each, and maybe like a handful of Pokemon that might fit into each of them?
Yeah, 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 we can do that for sure. So like I kind of mentioned them earlier, I touched up on them, but like the big archetypes you're gonna see hyper offense, you're gonna see balance, you're gonna see stall, and you're gonna see weather. Obviously, there's stuff like Trick Room, there's stuff like those Diglett Shedinja teams I was talking about. There's so many different archetypes, but those are like to me like the 4 big ones. So starting with like something like hyper offense, I would say like the characteristics are those are the types of teams that can afford like suicide leads, so mons that are designed to get hazards up, do a little bit of damage, and keep those hazards up. And then if they die, it's okay. They're pretty much designed to die, right? That kind of mon wouldn't really mesh well into like a stall team or a balance team because those are more designed around their longevity, right? And we can talk about that. Like a stall team is designed to usually they're designed to hazard stack, so they'll be designed to get spikes up, get stealth rocks up, even toxic spikes up, and then keep them up, right? They're pretty much just outlasting the opponent and just getting that chip damage little by little by little. They're characterized by their roles. They're gonna have several offensive physical walls, not offensive, but they'll have several physical walls, several special defense walls, and then stuff like, we call them phasers, stuff to validate setup sweepers, and so on and so forth. And then balance is kind of like it's kind of like the middle ground between those two, right? So there's like offensive pieces and then there's defensive pieces, and it kind of leverages both of those to edge out the opponent, right? So they can still pick up those setup sweeps with their offensive pieces. But if something unexpected happens, if their opponent switches in that choice banded like wall breaker, and they have that guy in the back, they can switch in safely still, right? And that kind of leads me, if you don't mind, I can explain like all of the roles that go into these archetypes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because yeah. So like with these roles, like options aren't unlimited. So often you'll be find yourself choosing like a Pokemon that you like less than the alternative, kind of like I said earlier, right? Um, but with these roles, like hyper offense has the suicide lead, stall has all of those walls, but what's important is meshing them together correctly, right? So you want to make sure that if I'm using a stall team, I'm using the right walls, or if I'm using a hyper offense team, I'm using the right wall breakers. Everything needs to be like cohesive in that kind of regard, right?
With those archetypes and the different like rules that would go into that, there's some of the Pokemon that you're saying that like would mesh like really well or not so well. So what are, for example, like in hyper offense, what would be like a couple of the Pokemon that you would pretty frequently see together, and why?
Okay, cool. So let's use overuse for example, because that's like the easiest example to say, right? But I'm thinking of hyper offense, and that is Pokemon like an Excadrill, like leading off with Earthquake, Rapid Spin, and Stealth Rock. So it can not only prevent hazards, it can also remove hazards. I'm sorry, that's the same thing. It can prevent hazards and it can set hazards, right? And that's useful. Those are two roles in one, and then it's also a ground type. So that's that role compression we were talking about earlier, making it kind of like this quintessential suicide lead for a lot of hyper offense teams. And then what you might see in the back is a choice scarf, like a really volatile choice scarf that can threaten a lot of damage very quickly. Like we obviously see Garchomp the most out of every Pokemon in that tier, often ran with the choice scarf, right? And then you'll also see a setup sweeper like Dragonite that benefits from not having hazards up and can apply immediate pressure to the opponent's team. Those are the kind of things you can expect, right? And that's not to say those Pokemon can't be used in Assault Team. Like we see so many bulky Garchomps or quirky Dragonites sets. Those are far less common than a bulky Garchomp. But
Yeah.
oftentimes those guys are better fit for one archetype or the other. There's only a few Pokemon that can like blend well into every archetype. You'll see stuff like Starmie, the aforementioned Garchomp.
And I
God, I guess
think I
Gliscor has
think
a spot
weather
everywhere.
is really like that too, right? Like when you see a
Mhm.
weather team like Rain, for example, like Rain, like you see Kabutops, you see Kingdra, and like you see the Pelipper, and you're like, ah, this could be only Rain. There's nothing else that this could be,
Yeah. That's that
right?
situation where I said like they can tell you they're clicking their specs hydro pump in the rain with Kingdra. Like they don't, I don't care. You're gonna take a
Yeah,
lot of damage from it, right?
yeah.
But they like those teams are designed like they all the other guys like set the table and then that Kingdra can eat. That's the whole idea, you know.
Yeah, and then maybe some of the other ones like isn't Chansey like the most notoriously known stall Pokemon?
That's Chansey the Rapper, man. Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
because again, that's a guy that offers not only like it's a mixed defensive presence, like it walls a handful of physical Pokemon and then damn near all of the special Pokemon. Good luck breaking that. But it also offers this kind of cleric factor where it can not only heal up your other guys with Wish and Teleport, it can get momentum with that teleport. It can also set hazards. Like Jesus, I don't know who designed this thing, but yeah, it can do it all, right? That's why it's that quintessential mon. And usually when you're playing stall, you're like, I need to kill this Chansey, and then I can figure out the rest because that's kind of like the glue holding it together, right?
Yeah. Okay. Um. So knowing the archetype now, and knowing that we're selecting Pokemon that are going to fit particular roles to serve that archetype and that purpose or that win strategy that you're looking for, are there like different like recommendations for how many of what Pokemon of what roles you would have on your team? Does that kind of like vary based on that archetype?
Yeah, I guess that kind of like just depends on how good your individual choices are at their particular role, and then like what certain weaknesses you need to patch up. So, like for example, stall teams will have they'll tend to have more physical walls than special walls because of that Chansey, because it's such an effective special wall. You might just need one other guy alongside it to wall. Like I'm thinking of a Assault team, we'll see Chansey and we'll see Skarmory. That's an insane physical wall and an insane special wall. But Chansey walls every special mon, where there's maybe physical mons that Skarmory doesn't counter. And then that's why we'll also see like other choices. God, I'm blanking on what a stall team would use.
Gliscor,
Like, yeah,
maybe.
obviously, right? We'll
Okay.
see. Yeah, of course. Yeah, great shout, great shout. But just think of like think of bulky wall Pokemon. Like we'll see Suicune physically invested more often than not. We'll see Hippowdon, a UU guy,
Yeah.
physically invested to wall those threats like that Skarmory can't wall, right? So they kind of like cover each other's weaknesses. That's how you kind of decide like how many of which you're gonna run. And then like the best example I can think of is like Chansey is a great physical or special wall, like I've said, but it gets destroyed by Gengar because it can't hit it. There's nothing it can do. Some of them run Sidewave, but usually it's better to run your Seismic Toss, right? So if there's another special wall on that Soul team, generally you'll see something that can deal with Gengar or the notorious teams that are 5 walls plus Weavile. That Weavile is there to get rid of that Gengar. That threatens Chansey, right?
And that's kind of here's where I'm shamelessly going to plug the other video that we did, where we actually made a team that was supposed to look like Stall, but it wasn't Stall at all. And
Mm.
instead of having like the 5 walls and then like plus the Weavile, it was supposed to look like the 5 walls plus a Dragonite, but it most
Yep.
certainly wasn't. It most certainly wasn't.
Oh yeah.
The wow factor, the timid wheezing, the new tech. You need to check that out. I'll link
Yeah,
that
yeah,
in the
yeah. But
description.
let's let's
I'll link that in the description. But yeah, so I feel like we've got like a pretty good basis for like the understanding like the kind of forest. Like this is the archetype. These are the roles on the team. Um, and now, what about like individual, like getting the individual Pokemon ready? Like, what are some of the things that we need to consider there with like the like stats and how that's done, or things like that?
Okay. So we can talk about stats because I can talk about that forever, right? So let's start with IVs because I think the really important thing to point out is that we have a little bit of wiggle room in MMO because our Pokemon are set to level 50 instead of generally you'll see on most battle simulators it's set to level 100. The only difference with that is that your IVs you have a little bit of wiggle room and you can have them at 30 instead of 31 if you're uninvested in that stat, and that's different because at level 100 you want the 31 still. But at level 50, the stats will literally be the same with 30 IVs.
I
So
didn't
that
know
is,
that actually. I'm out here overspending.
yeah, right. Exactly. That's not too interesting to me. I don't really mess with that part of the game. I'm like pure hardcore PvP. I think every time I breed a Pokemon, it takes like 5 mil because I messed it up like 4 different times. But that's neither here nor there. What I like to think about is EVs, right? Because obviously everyone knows how to EV train or what that does for you. If you don't, EVs just freeze whatever particular stat you invest them in. Um, but there's a lot of creativity you can do there. Like I can spend hours optimizing an EV spread to fit the team, right? And there's no like right or
So
wrong
I
answer.
am here's I am gonna pause. I am gonna stop you there, just because that's the kind of thing that like I feel like I only know because I've been watching so much content. But for someone that's just getting into it and everything, that might not be as apparent or as clear.
Sure,
But
sure.
like the different stats, right? Like the HP, attack, special attack, defense, special defense, and speed. Like the IVs are the genetic ones that
Hmm.
you catch it with it has already, or they're bred onto it to be increased and be better, like up to the cap of that 31. And then the same stat categories exist for the EVs, but you get the EVs specifically from defeating Pokemon. So like one Pokemon might give you defense, and then like one might give you speed. And so for PvP Pokemon, these things are trained specifically by defeating certain Pokemon uh,
Hmm.
to
Or
have
if you're
these
or
things
if you're
that are
like me, you
called
swipe and buy
spreads.
vitamins.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
So here's where I'm gonna have a little bit of thunder, right? Because that's what I
Okay.
do for the team, right? I
Oh
EV train and EXP train,
Ooh.
and everything. So that's
Oh,
like that's the
awkward.
part that I do actually know about a little bit about. So I gotta come
Yeah.
in here and be like, I'm not the total beginner, at least like in this segment, but yeah, so when talking about that spread with the EV is like specific things have to be defeated to be made that way. And for story playthroughs and stuff, it's not such a big deal, but for PvP, it is absolutely essential, is it not?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So when you're like actually making those EV spreads, like what you want to look at is like your environment, right? Because you only want to invest what you need. You don't want to have any excess that could go into other stats, right? The first example I think of is Ninjask in Never Use that has 160 speed, which is well above its peers, saving like the awkward electrode that you might see every now and then. But what you'll see because of that is Ninjask doesn't fully invest in its speed. It doesn't need to go 252 speed EVs, right? It can afford to invest a
Mm.
little bit of that into bulk. What you'll see it creep is it creeps 120, it creeps subtiles and alakazams and stuff like that. That hits that 120 speed. But the rest is going to actually go into like defense. And Ninjask has 45 base defense. So, dear God, it needs that investment. It helps it take a lot more hits than you would really expect, right? But ultimately, I mean, like what's important when you're making an EV spread is like your actual surroundings, what guys you're going to expect to go up against, right? So you don't want to tech for stuff that has 1% usage because you're probably not going to run into it. But if you're teching, say you're putting on your Skarmory, for example, I don't know if this is actually applicable because you usually want 252. But like, say you were teching your Skarmory to only take 50% or less from a Mamoswine's Icicle Crash, right? Because that's the most relevant threat to your team. That would make sense if the rest of your team can handle it, or maybe if it can't handle it, rather, you want to make sure you have your guaranteed check to that, right? What matters is your teammates and then what you're actually going to see in the tier. And then I would argue the thing you have to pay attention the most to is your speed stat. They call it speed creeping because there's always going to be something that usually runs 252 speed. So even if you're running a defensive Pokemon, if it benefits you enough to like outspeed that, then you want to put in that tiny bit of investment if it's not too costly for the rest of your stat spread. So like that Mammoth spread I literally just said, if you could put 16 speed in your Skarmory, maybe that guarantees that you outspeed base 50 Pokemon if that happened to be relevant, and you can still live that Mammoth, that would be useful. There's stuff like I'm trying to think of a good one. Like
What
I know the most about Never Use. I keep referencing it.
bold Starmie and Breloom?
Okay, that's actually yeah, that's a damn good example. So Bold Starmie. What you'll see is actually screw that example. Let me say Bold Gengar.
Okay.
Because Bold Gengar is 110. Starmie is 115 speed. So Gengar's a little bit slower. Bold Starmie can run max and still outspeed Adamant Mamoswine, but Gengar cannot. So Gengar needs a tiny bit of speed invest. I think it's off the top of my head, it's like 16 or 24 or 32. It's not a lot. It doesn't take away a lot of his defensive presence. But by just investing that tiny bit, even though you're not invested into speed a whole lot, you're guaranteeing that you're going to be faster than an Adamant Mamoswine. So if that's a big enough threat to you, that's a big enough threat to your team, then that kind of investment is going to be worth it because you can guarantee that you're faster than that particular mon, and you can get off a Will-O-Wisp, or you can get off a Talking Spike, or you can do what you want to do without getting OHKO'd first, right?
Yeah, this is super satisfying. This kind of part of the conversation because this is where the min maxer in me really comes out, and I actually kind of
Yup.
geek out, like looking at stuff like this, and I love the concept of trying to figure out what's going to give me the tiniest little bit of edge over something else and not be expected at all, like someone just clicking, like staying in and clicking a move thinking that they're going to outspeed and then they don't and just get boomed for it. Like that's so
Mm-hmm.
satisfying, so
Mm-hmm.
satisfying. Yeah.
Yeah. Or vice versa. Actually, I know I keep just throwing examples at you. Well, my favorite ever example of that kind of speed creeping is with Scavalier in Never Used. Because That Pokemon has base 20 speed, but there was a time a really long time ago I was leading off with my opponent's Escavalier and my Electros led off, and I'm like, bam, I got my kill with Flamethrower. This lead is awesome. And then it freaking outsped me and it killed me in one shot with Mega Horn. Because it choice bannered Escavalier, right?
Oh
20
man.
base speed. 20 base speed. It ran a Jolly Nature specifically because in that particular matchup, it could outspeed me. It could OHKO me. And I obviously do not see that coming whatsoever. So
Right.
there's so much stuff you can do. In my opinion, what separates the good from the great is that kind of like hyper optimization.
Yeah, that person that day was sitting behind their screen just evil laughing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I stole that, bro. I got one in my box now. I'm like, yeah, I need that. I need that.
Yeah. All of these combinations are really, really important. With the EVs and the IVs, like we've been talking about, but that's not all that there is to it when talking about what goes into putting together a Pokemon, right? Because there's abilities and held items as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me talk mainly about abilities because there's not honestly too many examples of Pokemon where you're like left guessing what ability it is. It doesn't happen as much as you would think, right? The two examples I can think of is like Conkeldurr, who can run Guts or Sheer Force, and then maybe Stormy that can run Natural Cure or Analytic, right? So if you're building a team and you're deciding that, I guess it would just come down to what role you're using it as, right? So like a Conkeldurr, I would say if it's a setup sweeper and you're going to run Guts, that's probably ideal because it's going to get burned. They're going to have opportunities to switch in their counters and their checks to try to burn you. And if you're Sheer Force, then you're going to risk that attack drop, right? And then for Stormy, if you're using an offensive Stormy, then you probably want the offensive ability analytic. Or if you're running defensive, you probably want that more defensive natural cure. There's a few other examples, maybe Salamence as well. I think that's a better example because it has like virtually 50-50 usage between Moxie and Intimidate. And that's just, again, where you need to think about like how your team benefits from that ability and how the role that Pokemon is supposed to fill would benefit from that ability. Because Moxie can transform Salamence into like the pseudo kind of setup sweeper and fulfill that role, where Intimidate makes it a little bit more defensively robust, right? So if your team lacks certain switch-ins, maybe you need that Intimidate Salamence just so you can sponge those switches if time ever calls for that.
Yeah, this is where I'm gonna mention that other video that we made again because we there's actually, I'm not gonna spoil it too much, but there's several hilarious things that happened exactly because of the point that you're making, that there's actually not too much variation in the abilities that are used for a specific Pokemon. Like there's a lot of ones that are just good and that's why they're used, or because it's PokeMMO and not, and there we have like mix and match things from different generations and all. Like there's a lot of like hidden abilities that aren't there for certain Pokemon and whatnot, so it just means that other things are what's used. But that actually, when you first told me this, it kind of surprised me a little bit. I was expecting a little bit more variation here, to add to the mind games and the layers of predicting and everything. But is that similar for items, or are there like a lot more like variability with like items that are held and stuff?
Yeah, I mean that's always gonna happen for items, right? So one of my favorite things to do is catch someone off guard with like a surprise choice Pokemon. Like maybe they expect to outspeed me and then I'm choice scarfed, or maybe they expect to live my attack and then holy crap, I'm choice banded, right? And then another thing actually that really catches people off guard is the gems, because unlike like Gen 5, if you play on Pokemon Showdown where gems are banned, gems are legal here. And what they'll do is automatically make a move do 1.5 times damage as if it was choice. So you'll see a lot of gems. Like the biggest example you'll see is like Dragon Gem Dragonite, just to get like a ridiculously strong hit, just off rip, if that's ever what's called for. And that's why people use it. They use it to catch you off guard. And you when you're in a battle, you always have to expect what potential items could be seen. But one of the biggest skills you can have is like at team preview, kind of identifying your opponent's team and identifying the roles of each Pokemon, right? So for example, if my team has like a relatively slow profile, and then I have a Mian shell in the middle of that. And let's say I'm like really weak to Volcarona or something, and you see my team at preview, you're probably going to assume that's a choice scarfed Mian shell, right? Because I need something to take care of Volcarona, and I need something that can do that whenever Volcarona is a +1, and that's going to be Mian shell. With its Stone Edge, it's going to be faster than a boosted Volcarona, right? So that's the kind of thing it does kind of only come with experience, being able to identify those kinds of
Yeah.
patterns. But you'd be surprised, because a lot of times, like, it's literally team preview, and you can look at your opponent's team and you can just start pointing out the roles, like, okay, that's scarfed, that's banded, that might be defensive.
Mhm.
Because
And
otherwise you would see holes, right?
yeah, and it was something that I think I had intended on maybe talking about a little bit later, but I think it makes sense to bring up here. There's that like PvP statistics tab, like in
Okay,
the
okay.
in like the bottom right, you know. So if you're wondering, you know, what are the most used Pokemon and what tier, if you're wondering what items those Pokemon are most often, if you're wondering um what, I think, does it have ability information in there too, or is it, I
Yep,
think,
yeah, it'll
yeah,
tell you,
yeah,
yeah, it'll
yeah,
tell you
exactly.
abilities, held items, if you have
Right,
them.
and it's like the not only the percentage of like how much they're used like in the tier, like the Pokemon themselves, but all of that other layer of detail as well. So super super useful tool. That kind of thing is flashing on the screen while I'm talking about it after the fact. Magic
Mm-hmm.
proof.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's especially as a new player. If you want to be good, like I mean, personally I feel winning is fun, and winning makes it
It
more
is.
fun, and
Mm-hmm.
this, like, you kind of need to like know stuff to be good. So that's like being a new player that lives in the statistics and watches like a bunch of games of like higher level players, uses guides like this to like level up the knowledge and everything. That's gonna be would build you to a place where you can see something at team preview and be like, oh yeah, like this is what they're gonna lead because this is what has stealth rock, or like, oh, like this is a stall team and it has Gliscor, so they're gonna lead Gliscor and click protect because that's what they all do.
Right, 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 right. But let me take that to a farther degree, because you talk about the PvP statistics tab, and it's so useful, right? Because you said you have it open when you team build. And I do the exact same thing. You should always have that open when you're team building, because that's where you can actually gauge out like what relevant threats you're teching for. Because if you're smart enough to make these really hyper specific EV spreads and move sets and abilities, and you tailor that all around the meta, then you best damn well have that statistics open to see what the meta actually is, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so like when I build, like, say I'm building hyper offense, I'm okay leaving like a hole in my team whenever the hole is to a Pokemon, and I'm looking and I'm like, okay, this is used 1% of the time. I'm probably gonna be okay, right? Whereas if that weakness is to Dragonite, I'm like, oh crap, okay, we gotta make some
Yeah,
changes. So
yeah, it's like if the team loses to +1 Dragonite, you're gonna have a horrible, you're gonna have a horrible win rate.
yeah, 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 exactly. And then you said the natures earlier. The natures and abilities are super useful, specifically for me, the natures. Because I think of another example I never use is Blastoise. That's one of the most potent setup sweepers. There's so many hyper offense teams you can build, and then you look at it and you're like, okay, if I give Blastoise one free turn to set up, I just immediately lose. So a lot of the times you're gonna want a revenge killer. There's a handful of Pokemon that are fast enough where if they have a choice scarf, they can come in and safely kill Blastoise, right? So one of my favorites is Galvantula. Although I don't use it often, I really like that Pokemon. And it's fast enough to come in after Blastoise is shell smashed and Oko with Thunder, so it can safely revenge kill. But it only does this if Blastoise is modest. Timid Blastoise will be faster. Is that an issue? Look at the statistics. I don't know. So modest Blastoise is used, oh god, I don't even know the number. But I can tell you, not timid Blastoise is 92% of the Blastoises. Timid has 8% usage. So 9 out of 10 Blastoises you're going to see are going to be slower than that Galvantula, which makes it a viable option to revenge kill. So that gives you more options in your team building, right? So you got to look at those natures. You got to realize the context of what you're actually going against. And then another thing is, like, when you're actually in the battle itself, you didn't talk about it yet, but the battle log is a really useful tool because that will let you, like, when you're actually in the battle and in the heat of it, you can actually discover what your opponent is using if you're not sure. So say you switch in, I don't know, so you switch in a certain Pokemon to another that you expected to live, and you get blasted, and your guy gets OHKO'd. You're like, what the hell just happened? Plug that into a calc. Okay, hold on, wait, let me look. Yeah, they're choice specs. Okay, that makes a lot of sense now. And that's the kind of information where, like, even when you're in the middle of the battle, that's going to give you the leg up to actually play it easier.
Now,
Because, like, for example, like, they're choiced into a specific move that allows your setup sweeper to get some boosts. That's really important information to know, right? That's going to give you the leg up.
now, the one thing that you can't see there that definitely factors into something that we haven't yet talked about is there's not going to be like statistics on like specific move sets. I feel like that would be kind of an alarming amount of information to be able to even track. But
Yeah,
yeah,
move
you
sets are
can't
tricky.
just like look up Dragonite and be like, okay, like what's the highest percentage used move set there? So there you're actually gonna need to be a little bit more creative yourself in terms of like going back to those archetypes, right? And like what role that Pokemon is and like what moves you want for it.
Hmm. Yeah, and honestly, moveset optimization is one of my favorite parts of the team building process because there's like endless text and quirky moves you can include on your mons. But usually, this is going to come into play when your team has like a noticeable weakness to a certain Pokemon. You need to bolster your matchup and maybe give you an unexpected KO wherever that's needed, right? So see stuff like Ice Fang Gliscor is used to get a leg up on a team that might be a little weak to Dragonite or Garchomp. We'll see Psycho Cut Scizor maybe because it gives itself an advantage into a potential Weezing matchup. And then we have the omnipresent hidden power, right? I think everybody here has experienced like a random hidden power just comes out and your guy gets OHKO'd and you're like, okay, well, what the hell is
Like
I gonna do
yeah,
about
like
that, right?
like
There's so much you can do.
the HP grass Moltres and stuff like that
Yeah,
is
right. Some of that's expected. Some of that's expected. I'll
mm.
give a spoiler myself. I've been running choice scarfed my low tick and never used, which is like already like what the hell is that? And then I have hidden power psychic on it, which is like at a glance you're like that is so unbelievably stupid. And then you look at Toxicroak, who's one of the most potent setup sweepers in that tier. Is faster than my low tick normally, and just completely sets up all over it because it's immune to those water types, right? So that's kind of a way to like flip those matchups upside down if your team has that
Hmm.
kind of weakness, right? You can take advantage of those move sets. But also important is when you're in a battle, you need to be able to identify what could come out, right? So even if you're not expecting it, you need to like sometimes respect the potential that that coverage is about to come out. And oftentimes you'll see like someone will switch in a Pokemon that normally counters another one and then immediately switch it out. And that's called scouting, right? So they'll scout for that coverage. And if they don't see it, then they're like, okay, I safely wall this guy. Let me come back in and take care of business,
Yeah. That so with there's that's where it really gets into so many different kinds of possibilities and everything like that because we go all the way from like the abilities where it's like, oh, there's this is pretty much it for this Pokemon. This is pretty much it for this Pokemon. And then we get to the move sets
right?
and then it's like, all right, this could be anything.
Yeah. And oftentimes, like you'll see, like the best Pokemon that have the most usage just happen to have like the best move coverage. Like, look at Starmie; it's pretty damn fast, but otherwise has really mediocre stats. It's just blessed with Rapid Spin and the best coverage you can possibly ask for, right? That leads
Hmm.
to high usage. Leads to
Yeah, I
nothing
mean,
specific.
being able to T-Bolt Surf and Psychic, right? And then have
Yep.
that offensive presence, and even one of the things I've actually in my limited experience, one of the things that I've had a bunch of fun with is actually like booming someone with switching in like a victory bell on a Starmie, like thinking it because it was bold, it didn't have Psychic. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just like see it coming, And it's just like this dude's about to like switch this in on me because he definitely thinks I don't have this move. And then you click the move and just like Oko the person and make him shut down the game. It's just like so
Right,
great.
right, right, right. And that's some super advanced stuff because it does take a good player to recognize like, hey, this is a defensive Stormy. It probably doesn't have this kind of coverage. So when you do happen to include that, it might catch him off guard.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, and that's the kind of thing too where like as a new player you should definitely if you're a new player and you want to get into it and you want to play and have fun and be good and everything, you should be kind of like hell bent on like learning everything that you can, but also don't necessarily just be like a meta slave either because you're coming from
Oh
like an
no, no,
outside
no.
perspective like have those crazy ass ideas and like try to do something with it because who knows, man, maybe you're blessed and you're the next meta change, you know?
Yeah, yeah, right. Sometimes, honestly, like the stupid stuff is like the birth of some like cool new idea. You know,
Yeah.
like I don't think there's ever a stupid set. Like so many times I'll see my teammates and myself. I'm like, damn, I just lost to this stupid ass set. It's like, well, shit, I lost to it. So how stupid could it be, right? It caught me off guard. Now, does
Mm-hmm.
that make it a one-off like tech? Because next time I'm gonna know, yes. But it got me that time. So if I'm in tournament play, then that's all it takes, right? Just one battle.
That's right. I think that was like a really cool place to bring up like tournament too, right? Because that's a nice segue. Well, I guess first of all, is there anything else that you want to like cover or feel like we should wrap up about like team building or like building a Pokemon for a PvP team?
Like in specifically, I don't think so. I mean, we talked about moves, right? We talked about abilities, we talked about
Hmm.
natures, the rules, the archetypes. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. I would just say like don't like ultimately like do not be afraid to fail because if I looked at my win percentage throughout all the seasons, it's only ever gone up. Like I've only ever gotten better because I'm just recognizing and being familiar with the patterns and the
Hmm.
trends in the tier. Like when you start off, you're not going to just completely annihilate everybody. Even if you have
Yeah.
the perfect team, like you're not going to know how to pilot it correctly. So
That
like
yeah,
don't
that
like
actually that brings up a really really good question, right? So when you're first starting out, what are your feelings about just using like pace of like streamers or like content creators or like from your friends or whatever, and like starting out with that before as opposed to like trying to build a team on your own? Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think that
uh
there's like a place where there should be like a change and you should be trying to build on your own to learn more? Like what do you think on that?
so I think if you're like brand new, there's absolutely nothing wrong with like taking someone else's pace. In fact, I don't think there's ever anything wrong with taking someone's pace. There's nothing that brings a bigger smile to my face than like taking someone's work and saying, "Okay, I'm gonna do it better now." Um, but I think yeah, that's the best thing you can do, honestly, because you're gonna have a team that is equipped for the metagame, or at least should be if you look from the right person, right? But it's gonna be equipped for the metagame, and it's gonna help you understand and recognize the roles on the team and why they're actually there. So, I think my most spammed team I've used in OU, like I didn't even make myself. I just kind of looked at it on paper, and I was like, running through like fake battles in my head, and I'm like, damn, this is really good. I'm gonna take this. And then I played with the team, and I saw like how the roles functioned. It's exactly how I thought. It was really cool, really unique. Um, but if you're just getting familiar with it, I don't think there's anything wrong with that because you gotta get your foot in the door before you start kind of making those innovations yourself. Otherwise, it might be a little bit nonsensical. You might get it right, but you might think of a tech that's kind of like completely irrelevant, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I know this is the age of AI, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of people and myself included that will kind of like turn to AI for some help to like bounce ideas off of when team building and everything. But in that personal experience, what I can say is, PokeMMO is a fairly niche game. So I found that the AI isn't always like on the up and up of the intricacies of like our specific game. So you can't just be like, give me a sick competitive team for PokeMMO, like OU ladder, and then just like copy and paste it into and then like expect it to do well. It will not.
Yeah, yeah.
It will not. I assure you. I assure you that. So, you actually you're far better off, in my opinion, just like snagging a paste from someone that has like a successful team,
Yeah, and then
like a
also
content creator
also
stream or something. Yeah.
let me interrupt because I think the best resource you can have in regards to that, outside of AI generated teams, would be like an actual team in MMO. Like that's the whole reason they exist, right? There's whole tournaments that involve team play, right?
Hmm.
Because the best thing you can do when you're trying to improve a team is bounce your ideas off of somebody else, get a different set of eyes off it. Like I promise you, that's half the reason that teams exist, because you improve each other, you can battle each other, even you can show each other your teams, and just literally getting that outside perspective on your team. There might be something that you missed that someone else is going to pick up on. Now I have plenty of teammates that are pessimistic, and I'll send a pace and they'll say this sucks, you should never use it, and then I win a tournament with it, and I'm like, you're a dumbass. Um, but more often than not, if there's a big hole in your team, maybe you missed it, and maybe someone can point that out for you. That's all that being on a team is about, right?
Yeah.
It's the best resource you have, I promise.
All right, so I feel like we're in a good place. We've got, let's say we've got a team now. We've used all of this info. We've either got a paste, or we built a team. We've queued it up. What is it? Well, what does queuing it up even look like? Right? You go to the PvP menu, right? And then the matchups, and then you don't check casual, because there's no such thing as a casual game in this game, right? You'll never
No, there's
you'll
not.
you'll never find one. Only ranked. So don't make that mistake sitting there waiting for something to happen like I did the first time.
Yeah, that's craziness. No, that's the thing.
Yeah, but so how does that system actually work with like ranked points and like tiering, and then like I know you've mentioned tournaments, and I think there's like community like events and like battles. Can you illuminate the masses on some of that, please?
Oh, for sure, for sure, for sure. So I'll start with the rank system. So, like, frankly, in my opinion, the rank system is like completely irrelevant, and you could just throw it out the window, because I do not think it matters, with the exception of if you're like 1, 2, or 3, because those get cool hats. So there's a good bit of competition for that, right? The badges go from novice trainer, ace trainer, veteran trainer, and then rank 1, right? But they don't pertain to like win rate or anything like that. They're just based off of your elo, and then you gain points off of your elo compared to your opponents when you win a game, right? So if you're against someone that's a similar rank than you or higher, then you'll gain a lot of elo. If you're against a novice trainer and you're rank 1, you will literally gain less than half of an elo. I speak from experience. I swear to God, it's so hard. It's so hard to gain elo once you're high up.
Yeah,
And then
that's
for tournaments,
and
go
then
ahead.
that's when you face someone like me that's getting coached by someone like you, and you put up your half an elo against me that's just there, ready to that's just drooling,
Oh
just
my God,
drooling. He's like
yeah.
ready for it. It's like, put me in, coach. I've
It's
got
like
this.
the risk versus reward is crazy, because like you're a novice, like I have no idea what the hell you're about to throw at me. I have
That's
everything
right.
to lose, right? But as far as tournaments to join, like there's loads of them, right? The most visible ones are in the tournament tab. Those are called the scripted tournaments. So you might have reserve spots for those. If you're a high enough rank, then you can join it. Otherwise, it's first come, first serve. So you gotta kind of like snipe it. You gotta be ready when it starts. And like, okay, join now, right? And then like community tournaments, the biggest ones I can think of are the PSL and TCL. Those are like the highest level tournaments where people really build and try, and their teams work hard to win those tournaments, because they often have great prizes, or it's just a nice title to add to your trophy room, right?
And
And then in addition to those, there's also the team tournament, which is kind of like its own thing, right? So you'll see once a month, all of the teams will join in Lily Cove, and it's actually like a 3v3 format. So you'll have 3 players playing at the same time in 3 different tiers, right? And it's basically, I mean, it's basically just a tournament, except it's team versus team, right? And that's kind of like the pinnacle, in my opinion, of like team play because people really, really go hard for that. They really try to scout every player they can. They try to counter every build they can, or get as much information as possible, get their about their opponent to kind of give them that leg up, right? And the reason they do that is because you get, again, you get cool hats at the end of the season,
Yeah.
depending on who the team of the year is, right?
Is
And then
that what I
after that,
pulled up
even
on? Is that what I pulled up on the other day?
it is. No, no,
Yeah.
no. Actually, no, no, no. That was TCO. That was another team league, but it's definitely not taken in the same light as that because the team
Okay.
tournament is like it's 12 months throughout the year, right? So the best team who has the most points and the most wins at the end of the year obviously gets those cool vanities, but then also like the top 8 teams are pulled in for like an exclusive tournament in January after everything's all said and done, and then the winner of that gets the cup of the year, which if you've never seen that vanity, it's like a back vanity. I think you can flag down any Val Solemn Promise member and you'll see it on their back probably. If you don't know what that looks like, it's pretty cool. But people try hard for it, right? They want to add that trophy.
Yeah, that sounds like the good stuff. That definitely sounds like the good stuff. I love
Hmm.
I love being the novice trainer, just like seeing like watching like streamers just be like, "Oh no, a novice trainer." It's like the
Hmm.
fear is so much more facing a novice trainer than someone that's like top 100 on the ladder. It's like
Yeah, bro,
it's
you don't know
easier
what's
to
coming.
predict,
I'm
right?
like, oh, every day my teammates are like gonna be complaining in chat. They're like, this guy just beat me with a choice spec shuckle, and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, bro, I don't just go next. I don't know. Who knows?
One of the last things to cover might be some of the more big brain stuff, or because this is a framework, right? Like everything that goes into team archetype, roles on a team, choosing Pokemon for a team, building that, the different stats, abilities, items, um, like queuing up for games, like going in like tournaments, the community type activities and everything. But what about actually conducting yourself in a battle? Right. Like I know
Okay,
like one of the
so
things that you were saying earlier, like I heard like hazards. That's like a fundamental strategy, it sounds like, no matter what archetype you're playing. Um
yeah, yeah.
so those kinds of things, like what goes into like how to predict someone, like if you're new and you're like looking at that team preview. You're new, you're starting your battle. How do you go about approaching developing the skills of battle strategy?
So I kind of brushed up on it earlier. Obviously, a lot of it is trial and error, right? You need to recognize those patterns. If you don't know what moves guys know, then you need to learn that,
Hmm.
right? But it starts at team preview, right? Because you look at your opponent's team and you need to be able to identify these win conditions, right? So let's say that I'm super weak to a Dragon Dance Dragonite. My team is terrible, for the record. But let's say I'm super weak to that, and I see Dragonite in preview. Then that's something I need to identify right then and there and say, okay, if this thing gets to click that button, that's his win condition, right? You hear that word a lot. That's his win con. So I need to do everything in my power to make sure that does not get set up. That thing needs to be kill on sight. And I cannot give it any free opportunities to do what it wants to do, right? And then another mistake that I see often is that people don't leverage like their risk properly when they're trying to make predictions and switches, right? Because it's always so rewarding to make that sick prediction. It's like, oh man, I got you. I got your ass. Your guy just got O code for free because I made that sick prediction. But you have to think like a few turns in advance, right? You have to think like, if I take this KO, does that open up their condition to come in and set up, right? Like I can make this sick predict, but now I'm choice locked into a ground type move and there's still that Dragonite. So that's cool. I got the KO, but yeah, now I lose the game, right? And then you also have to think like, what if I'm trying to make a sick double switch or I'm trying to do that and my opponent doesn't do what I expect? You have to account for that worst case scenario because maybe your switch can be punished by your opponent making the right read, right? If your risk is a little, then take it. If you're not risking outright dying or it's basically minimal risk on the turn going bad, then take it. If the risk is big, if you lose the game immediately, because your opponent sees that you could do that prediction and counter predicts you, then maybe that's not exactly the turn that you should be going for because you just lost on the spot, right? You always have to see that worst case scenario. And then you have stuff like momentum, like U-turn and volt switch and those pivoting moves. You have to take advantage of these incredibly broken mechanics. And God, I wish Pokemon never made those moves, but they did, right? They exist. They're there. Those pivoting moves are there. They're incredibly strong. You have to include those in your team builder, and you have to include counters for those in your team builder too. So your countermeasures to that are obviously your ground type for Volt Switch. You have Rocky Helmet. You have entry hazards if you're a hyper offense team. But a lot of this process is just like trial and error. You know, like you're always going to improve, and quite frankly, getting your ass kicked is the best way to learn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's you stand to do a lot of losing, but don't think of it as losing. Think of it as learning.
I mean, truly, bro, truly. Like I don't learn anything from 6-0ing someone. I don't
Right.
learn a single thing. Because what if
Yeah.
I have a garbage team and my setup sweeper just happens to 6-0 them, and then I sweep them with that setup sweeper, and I'm like, this team is so good, let's go, and then I bring it to tournament and get smoked. I
Yeah.
didn't learn shit, right?
Yeah. Or if you like flamed someone 15 times in a row with Iron Head, it's like, was that really
Mm-hmm.
good, or are you just a
Mm-hmm.
lucky ass kid?
Right. Exactly.
One thing that just occurred to me that we haven't mentioned thus far is that PvP Pokemon are actually like pretty freaking expensive in game. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we're talking about like testing concepts, or like you're building maybe a first ever team, or like you're maybe trying to trial some concepts and everything. You don't want to just be like forking out like millions for these Pokemon necessarily before you maybe get a chance to test that, or like test the concept. So do you have any tips or tricks for being able to do that?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, like if you're in an experienced enough team and you can get the privilege to actually join one of those teams and have people to bounce your ideas off of, then they're going to be able to kind of like do that proof of concept for you before you bring it into light, right? So they can actually evaluate your team and say, these are the holes, this is what you need to change before you actually make this. But aside from that, there is a Pokemon Showdown server where you can just build teams and battle them against whoever you want. And there's a custom PokeMMO like format that'll have all of the specifications, all the quirks for MMO like built into it. You can test teams there, right? And we'll include that link. Maybe it'll be on the screen now. I'll look really stupid if it's not, but it'll be funny at least. So please laugh. Um, but there's platforms where you can test that stuff, so you don't have to immediately make those teams and have that huge investment. You can kind of test it out first beforehand, right?
Uh,
Um,
yeah, that's great. That's great because it takes a decent amount. It's an MMO, right? So
mhm.
it does. If you're earning money in game, it takes time. It's not like it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, and even the easiest strategies, like take hours a day, right? Like the 3 hours that you
Yeah,
can do the 3 hours at the 6 hour intervals that you can do the rich trainer runs, and then the gym reruns, and yeah, and E4 reruns are even an investment in themselves, just being able to get that up and be able to do that. So having a way to test things ahead of time is very, very good.
mm-hmm. Stuff is expensive. I'd love to tell everyone just swipe your card and get your mons, but I quite frankly I have like 500 cop mons in my box, and probably 400 of them don't see the light of day. So you know,
Yeah.
you can test a little bit. It'll help you out.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'm definitely, my RNG is terrible. Um when it comes to
Confirmation bias. Everybody's is.
No, 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 no.
Mm,
I actually, there's already been recordings of me online just like having horrible RNG. Like, yeah, like, I don't think I should ever run a move like Hurricane, because like Hurricane, like,
that's the best
Hurricane,
example. Yeah.
yeah, Hurricane has like, I don't know. It seems like it's reversed for me. Like it has a 30% hit rate. I feel like we've covered a ton of information. My brain's like about to explode.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, me too.
Um, what do you think? Do you think we're about ready to wrap up?
Yeah, I think so. I guess like the last thing I'll say is like the biggest like mistakes I see people play or see people do rather is like first of all, you can't let yourself get jaded by RNG, right? This game is inherently luck based a majority of the time, and obviously there's things you can do to absolutely like minimize that for yourself. But the best way to like actually get better is to watch high level play. Especially if there's commentary, then you can understand like the thought processes and decision making that goes into every turn. Personally, that helps me a ton with understanding the actual like game theory that hasn't already been like made apparent to me. There's a lot of like tiny little things. Like I was watching a game today and my teammate, my very good friend, was playing doubles and his win condition 100% of the time was literally KOing his own Pokemon. Where the other way he could win was landing Hurricane. One's
Oh yeah.
100%, one's 70%, and you can probably guess what happened, right? But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't see that he could KO his own Pokemon. I didn't even think about that. Someone pointed that out to me, and I'm like, oh my god, okay, I'm gonna keep that one in my brain, right? If I ever find myself playing doubles or whatever. Like, there's always ways you can get better. Don't ever think you're at the top, because I promise you never are.
Yeah,
Like, you
and
can always
and
improve.
we are gonna be playing a bunch of games with crazy team concepts and having all of that really detailed expert level commentary coming from Drew Q over on his channel, which will be linked in the title. So definitely check that out and be sure to follow. This is where I realize, we're basically an hour and 15 minutes into a video, and I never said like or sub or follow like a single time. So,
Oh, hold on. There's something coming over that's gonna tell you to sub and follow. Hold on.
oh, now
Guys,
you have to.
please, yeah. If you like dogs, if you like animals, then do what you gotta do, or else you're,
If you
yeah, you
made
don't
it
like
this far
animals.
and you saw the dog on camera, you have to sub.
Absolutely.
But
Thanks,
yeah,
guys.
I really appreciate your time putting this together. Incredibly valuable experience, a decade or more of high level PvP that we never did get back to your accolades. Oh well.
It doesn't matter, man. What matters is that's a lot of time, and I still suck. So you can always improve. That's what it's about, right?
Yeah, well, this was great, man. Thank you. I hope everyone that you got some value from this, you learned something from this, and yeah, let us know in the comments how your first PvP games go. If there's anything you feel like we missed, or if there's anything you want us to go in more depth, or have any follow-up questions, definitely send those over. Can answer all of that in the comments, and also potentially even make like a follow-up video if there's enough of those things coming through too. So yeah, thank you all for watching. Super appreciate you, and catch you next time. Peace.